right, everybody. So today we are back with another Q&A with Abel. How are you doing, man?
Good, good, not too bad. Um, just made my comeback
Yeah,
on
saw that.
YouTube. Yeah, I was sitting in front of the title for so long. I wrote up a lot of them, but so it was really hard to write up a title which was getting across what I wanted, but it's not like two lines almost.
Yeah, yeah.
So and like I could never start in a way that would be sort of like some of them were along the lines of like video games saved me, or maybe even I don't know what the title was actually. And it's like that's weird. Like, so what are they like? People are just gonna think that I'm saying goodbye because like from now on I'm a gamer, or
Right.
so. But
Yeah, I
I
thought it was
could
a
say
good video
it's
though. It was a good update.
yeah. Thanks. Well, I'm very glad that I didn't title it "Where Have I Been" and "I'm Back," like any
The
of
answer
those.
will shock you.
Yeah. Yes. So.
Cool. All right. So we're just going to dive into it. When people reach out, I mean, I always try to include the questions and I'll just be upfront whether it's an area that I'm not that familiar with or I am. So just quickly, David had asked how to cure shin splints while still running. Help me, doc. So am no expert when it comes to running. I've talked many times about how I'm not a fan of running or cardio in general, although we can get into later about I am doing more
Same.
of it now. And I've almost never had shin splints. So this is one where I don't want to ignore you, but I don't have a great answer for you. I would assume, like any sort of, overuse injury, there's going to be some level of cutting back and gradually introducing over time. But beyond that, I don't want to act like I'm a running expert at all.
Agreed. Agreed.
Okay. So Ben said, "Hey man, hope all is well. I was thinking, obviously, I'm pretty informed of the stuff. Skip down a little bit. I wonder how far you could push myo-reps or rest pause volume and still be effective. The reason I bring this up is because I was at the gym and the other day I saw someone using those techniques. And I'm not kidding. This chick probably did 10 mini sets on leg extensions after her initial set. Got me thinking, I wonder how far you could actually push that. So I was like, I'll tell Dave. Okay, you get an idea. All right. So, obviously there's a whole background there on effective reps and, this idea that more reps closer to failure are going to be more stimulative. And that's a big reason for rest pause and myo reps and whatnot. I don't know if there's any literature comparing number of drops. There's certainly literature comparing rest pause and drop sets and straight sets and different rest intervals. I'm not sure outside of anecdote if I've seen anything actually talking about number of drops.
So
I
this is
think
drop sets we were talking about? Like the girl
no,
was
I should
dropping the
say
weight?
no, no. I think he was talking about myo reps, like pauses. So I shouldn't say
Yeah.
drops. Yeah, I should say yeah, like how many rest
Oh,
pause
okay, okay,
sets.
okay, okay.
I think there the biggest limitation is just eventually, as long as your rest times are pretty short, as they would be with a rest pause, you're eventually just not going to be able to do anything. I mean, you could probably do 15, and then if you're really pushing that 15 and you're only resting 30 seconds, I mean, in my reps, it's less, that might go down to 6 or 5, and then it's like 4 or 3, 2. So at some point, I mean, you're barely going to be able to move it. I don't think that would necessarily be a bad way to do it. I think if you're getting less than a couple of reps, just practically, I don't think it's doing a whole lot for you. But I don't think there's actually any research on that. What do you think, Abel?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that I mean the research is usually equating volume load, and that one and I mean in the case of so volume load is basically just weight times reps times sets. And in the case of rest pause, if you want to compare that with normal training, then that's pretty much the only way you can compare it. Um, and so in that research, they're like roughly equally effective. So if from then on we can just think further and say, okay, how how many different setups you can make up where it's still going to be effective. Like you can basically just think with that volume load. So okay, if I um, do a whole bunch. Oh no, because we are not reducing the weight. Well,
Hmm.
anyway, I'm gonna finish the thought. So like for example, like you can just check like if I just keep doing mini set after mini set, and I reduce the weight to almost nothing. I mean, what sort of volume load am I getting at the end? Um, I think I think a more simple solution though is just simply looking at like, is there some sort of progression over time? So like I could do 20 mini sets if I just keep extending the rest periods, for example. So if I don't keep them strict, but like okay, like I'm gonna start with like I take like a couple of deep breaths between mini sets, and then eventually I extend that. Like yeah, I could go up to like some super high number of mini sets, and I'm gonna have like not only like basically almost not gonna be able to like extend my arm anymore because the pump will be so crazy. But I I knowing myself, I just don't think I could progress with that. Like there will be just kind of I'm gonna be fluctuating around that same weight, or like sometimes dropping over and rarely exceeding it. That's what's gonna happen in my case. So that's why like myo reps and any sort of intensity technique is best done with some sort of auto regulation in it. So I think it's totally conceivable that that girl just found her sweet spot. Like, yeah, like she can do set after set after set. Um, I think most people are like, most guys especially are going to find that it's just not happening. Like, if you rest some reasonable amount of time between these mini sets, like you're not going to be able to do 10. Like, for example, mine, if I follow the traditional myo rep prescription, which is what is it, like 4 or 5 deep breaths. So that's like something like 15 seconds or so, 10, 15 seconds. I mean, it's going to go like 15 reps in the beginning, and then like 4, 4, 3, like that, and I'm done.
Yeah.
So, and you might have a little bit more, but it's not going to be crazy much more, I think. So I think
Yeah.
just auto regulate in some way, and then you're going to get your answer.
Yeah, and lastly, I would say it's somewhat going to depend on the exercise as well. So I think machines are
Hmm.
great for rest pause. Like if you've ever tried to rest pause a dumbbell bench press, for example, I mean that's just the worst. Like the
Oh yeah,
energy
that's
involved and like kicking it up is just ridiculous. And
yeah.
even like a barbell bench press, like I mean you could literally just be like, okay, I literally can't do another rep. So just something to keep in mind. Obviously, it's going to be somewhat exercise dependent. I personally like for rest pause 3 total sets. So first one, rest 30 seconds, second one, rest 30 seconds, then the final one. Drop sets, 3, maybe 4 total. That's what I think is somewhat of a sweet spot.
Yeah, but by the way, even like any sort of pressing, actually, I felt like on a chest press machine, even like I was always like debating myself, like, okay, so like when I'm like setting up and like, okay, some like shoulder retraction and everything,
Mm,
like, do I count that in the rest, or like that starts after? Because then it could be really variable, like
yeah,
if I do that after the rest period. So
I suppose.
yeah,
I think as long as you're consistent, it's not a huge deal there.
yeah, I guess.
So Jared Jones asked, I've recently been having joint and tendon pain. I'm already making modifications to training, tempo, range of motion, reduced volume, etc. Have you looked into research around supplementation for joint recovery, joint and tendon pain and recovery? If so, what are the best? So I have an answer, but I don't know if you want to go first, Abel.
So last time I looked into it, it was not really anything that actually seemed positive enough to where like nothing was positive enough to where like you would actually expect a detectable difference. So like glucosamine and what's the
Chondroitin.
the other one? Yes.
Chondroitin, yeah.
So yeah. So like it's kind of like, if it's really bad, then like at this point you're willing to try anything that could help at all because you're doing everything that you can and they're recommending already. Then yeah, sure, like invest into it. But other than that, nothing really promising. But that was a while ago that I looked into this, admittedly. So do you know of
Yeah,
something more?
so I know obviously in this particular case, he is saying that he's already modified the training. I would just want to touch on that briefly, just to say that that is going to be the bigger factor for most people is modifying the training. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
I think I was talking not too long ago about having some significant elbow tendonitis and just some modifications in my training for a few weeks. I mean, that's completely gone. Obviously, as one gets older, you're more likely to have issues. If you're training for a sport and you can't modify things, you're more likely to have issues. But I do think that the training is probably going to be the biggest factor there. And you might have to have a significant period of deloading or unloading that joint before, like if you, I mean, you almost think of like the maintenance with gaining muscle, right? And it takes a lot more to
Mm,
gain than maintain. To some degree, with an injury, it might take a lot of volume to get to the point that you're having these overuse nagging pains. However, you might have to significantly drop back to actually get it to the point that it's feeling okay before you ramp back up. So I just say
oh yeah.
that as far as supplements, outside, if we're, I'm assuming you just mean like over-the-counter supplements, we're not talking injections or anything like that. Then yes, glucosamine and chondroitin. There's some evidence that those can provide a minor benefit. Fish oil has some evidence that it can provide a benefit. Curcumin, even more so actually for some arthritic patients that can be beneficial. Some will talk about vitamin D, but I would agree there's nothing that I've seen that is really promising for joint pain. Not to say don't try those things. There is literature on it. It's just not terribly convincing to a great magnitude.
Yeah, and it's also like I think a useful way of thinking about these things is it's not necessarily that these things don't work. It's just that relative to other things that either work more effectively or other things that could make the situation so much worse. Relative to those things, it's just not gonna be detectable. So it's like what it reminds me of. Someone was I had a combo with someone who was asking me about like if they were to hop on gear, so steroids, like would I recommend like higher training frequency, lower training frequency? And I was saying, well, not saying that that wouldn't have an impact, like it would probably, but like compared to how much steroids would boost your gains,
Right.
there's no way you would notice that. So it's kind of like that. Like if right now you have like elbow pain or any kind of joint pain, and your training is still like every session is like aggravating that joint, like that is going to be so bad for that joint issue that like any sort of supplement is going to be like just yeah, like throwing a drop of water onto like a forest fire or something.
Right.
Or if you modified your training already compared to that, I mean, some supplements is going to be like throwing a match into a forest fire. So,
Yeah, sure.
but yeah,
Cool. All right. Two quick ones here. Sleeping Wolf asks, how is life? Life's good, man. Abel,
hmm.
how's life?
Yeah, life is not too bad. Cat is here behind me, by the way, but you just
Oh, very blurry.
couldn't cannot see it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I think we'll also get into a little bit of like life talk towards the end. So watch out, Sleeping
yes.
Wolf. We'll come back to it. Another quick one. Hey, Dave, hope you're doing well. Any advice on dental health? All right, Abel, what do you got?
Yeah, I was gonna ask if I can take this one. Well, just kidding.
It's funny.
We
I
we are
mean,
making this joke every time.
we are, yes, and we'll continue to make it. Yeah, so I won't go into much on this since I don't think most of the audience is that interested. And I will say though that similar to probably even more so than like with a medical GP, if really is one of those areas where people just kind of did the basics, they just wouldn't need much. I'm not saying nothing would happen. People would still break teeth and things like that. But as far as like decay and periodontal disease, I mean, literally, like if you're brushing your teeth and flossing twice a day and going to a dentist a couple times a year, like you just won't have many issues. It's when people ignore those things. So fortunately, it's pretty basic. All right.
Actually,
Go ahead.
can I
Yes.
ask an dental anthropology question? So, what is your like? What do you think? Like, if you look at it from like evolutionary sort of lens, like cavemen, do you think? I mean, because like obviously they didn't brush their teeth like we can. Um, do you think that the reason that their teeth didn't just fall out like super fast, because I'm assuming it didn't, is because like they was just completely different, like in the anatomy of the whatever skull and everything that is happening up here, or they might have used something that helped them with that. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I don't think there's a large anatomical difference. I mean, first of all, you're not getting your permanent teeth right into, I mean, obviously they come in at different times, but 6 to
Yeah.
13 years of age. So let's just call it 13 by the time you have your full dentition. And then it's not like these people were living to 90 in most cases, right? And they were losing
That's
teeth.
true.
They were having, infections, and they were losing teeth. I mean, I don't think many of them made it to be, let's say, 40 and had a full dentition. And then also, of course,
Yeah.
diet was very different, right? So not that I would be somebody who says sugar is the devil or anything like that, but it's not like they were eating cereals all day and things like that, just coating their teeth. Really, the main source of sugar would have been fruit, and then and not that you can't get cavities if you're not eating sugar, but obviously there were significant dietary differences as well.
Like in terms of like dental health, like the sources of food that you're eating, like what would you, how big of a role does that play?
It does play a role, but it's one of those things like if you have proper dental hygiene, as we'd call it, you can get away with a lot. So the worst thing is something that's coating your teeth all day. So if you're like sipping soda all day, that's terrible because it's not only a sugary drink, it's also acidic. So even diet soda, which is acidic, can be
Yeah.
problematic, but not as much as just like a regular, let's say Coca-Cola or something like that. Um, but if somebody told me that they're eating a high amount of sugar, but they still had adequate dental habits, I don't think for most people that would be terrible. And again, obviously, genetics, like everything, are going to play a role. So some people naturally have a predisposition to more caries, meaning cavities, more likely to get periodontal disease, et cetera. But you do find a lot of patients be like, oh, well, it's just my genetics, and my mom had dentures and her mom had dentures. And it's like, well, yeah, but it's probably also their habits as well. Like nobody is really destined to have to lose their teeth.
Yeah.
But yeah, the diet definitely factors. And then even the other way around, like xylitol gum, like sugar-free gum has xylitol in it. So that's anti-carcinogenic. And it also promotes salivation. So two ways that something like that could
Hmm.
help prevent caries.
Uh, is a straw helping with the when you're drinking something?
Yeah, yeah. So like if you were to have
Okay.
like even like for staining, if you were to have coffee, like iced coffee all the time, probably better to have a straw so it
Oh.
goes towards the back of the mouth and is
So
not coating your
I,
teeth.
I started using it because we did a Q&A like this, and you said that to someone. That's why I remember. So I
Mm.
actually started using it since then. Like I don't know, for like 2 years at this point.
Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't worry too much about this, but I will say that if somebody, especially women, were using a straw like all the time, you're going to be a little bit more likely to get those lip lines, as one ages. So again, if
Hmm.
somebody's like drinking like once a day through a straw, I don't think that'd be a factor. But if somebody was just like sipping all day, that could factor in a little
Right,
bit.
right.
Cool. All
Just grow
right.
a
That's
beard,
enough.
hide it.
Right, right. Enough dental talk. So, how important are carbs for hypertrophy? This is from Buck Life.
So, I mean, I think a long story short is that they're not very important, but might potentially help. So, I mean, honestly, if you had asked me this, I don't know, like maybe a year and a half ago or so, maybe 2 years ago, where there was some like that, those studies were reviewed by quite a lot of people that basically showed that even if you just deplete your glycogen stores like partially, that could result in some performance loss. Um, so because of that, it might be not technically completely needless. So because that's what I would have said like a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. Like it's not needed at all. Um, so if you want to go like carnivore or like as close to zero carb as possible, like there might be other reasons not to do it, but like muscle building, I mean, it's not really one of them. But uh, there might be a small difference. Again, is it big enough to actually detect it over the long term? Maybe not. But like if you're a Steve Hall kind of guy, like pretty much dedicating everything to this, then you might want to take that into account and keep your carbs at least at like, I don't know, over 100 or something like that.
I would guess that if you had two twins and one was running a ketogenic diet for 5 years and the other one was running a more balanced diet, that the one with the more balanced diet would come out ahead from a physique standpoint. That would be my suspicion. I mean, mechanistically, there are certainly arguments you could come up for that. And also anecdotally, but anecdote is tough just because you don't. have too many people who are very dedicated to bodybuilding who are doing strictly ketogenic diets. I've done
Mm,
back in high school, I did a keto bulk. I did the anabolic diet, which really is more of like a cyclical ketogenic diet. So you have a high carb day once a week in my
yeah.
freshman year. And then I've done carnivore for a month, but I was dieting during that time. And I've done ketogenic diets throughout. On the whole, I feel like those were less productive times to my training, but not so much less. It wasn't like, wow, I'm on a ketogenic diet and I just can't build muscle. It wasn't that at all. Especially the first time I did it in high school. That was actually a pretty productive period. But other than that, so I do think the carbs are important. I also think you have to consider it's one of those things where, in the purest sense, is it the carb or is it the calories that the carbs are adding? Because the reality is, most people are not going to be super successful bulking with a ketogenic diet. I remember when I had Mike Israetel and Steve Hall on the podcast, probably the first time I had them on, so many years ago. And Mike was like, "Wait, hold on, you've done a keto bulk?" And he was like, "You're on the podcast now. Like, tell us about this experience." And man, even when my appetite was way higher than it is these days, eating 3,500 to 4,000 calories a day of just like meat and peanut butter, and I was like drinking olive oil, like it was just disgusting. And most people aren't going to do that. And I don't know how anybody bulks up on a carnivore diet if you're just consistently eating 3, 4 times a day of like just huge steaks. If again, if it's truly like 4,000
Yeah,
calories,
yeah.
that just seems crazy to me. So effectively, I feel like they are even more important than I was originally stating, in the sense that I think that's where you're going to get a lot of calories from, if you're somebody who's really trying to push the weight up. So I would say they are fairly important if you wanted a specific answer, but for different reasons.
Yeah, it's still something that I want to try at one point. But although I have to say that as I'm getting older, like my appetite is a lot less just insane
Yeah,
compared to what it used to be. But it's still, I think the issue is, so like a lot depends on how strict you are with the fat sources as well. So like if peanut butter is allowed, then okay, that will help. If
oh
like
yeah.
if other nuts, for example, are allowed, then it's gonna be even easier. But yeah, if you're like sticking with fatty meat and like non-starchy veggies and like eggs and and not much else, then I mean, yeah, then it's gonna be rough.
It's funny, in 2020, we went to, there's a place called Fogo de Chao. It's a Brazilian steakhouse. So some people might be familiar. They come around with all these different meats. And, if you have your card up, like if it's green, they'll keep coming by with more stuff. And
Mm,
I think there was somewhere between 15 and 20 different meats. And we went in 2020, and I only had good memories of the food there. Like obviously you get very full at some point, but
mm,
we went a couple months ago and it started really great. And after halfway, I was like, well, I'm still trying new things, but it was weird. Even some things I retried from the start of the meal at the end, it was just so fatty and just like even there was like a potato salad, so not a meat, obviously. And all I could just taste was just like lard and butter. Like the desire for it was just so much lower. And so I'm sure, because this has happened to me, there's probably people listening who'd be like, oh, peanut butter, I could eat 2 jars of peanut butter. And it's like you think that until you're having half a cup of it on 4,000 calories a day, mixing down with olive oil. Like eventually it's just not appealing.
yeah.
So yeah, what I would say is if you do ever want to try a ketogenic diet, try it after a diet, because you can still maintain relatively low calories, and it's kind of amazing how much better some of these things can taste. Like if you're bulking,
Mm,
you just had like vegetables with some oil, that's just like a standard thing. But as you're coming out of this big deficit, just having a tablespoon of peanut butter or like these richer foods that, I mean, if you think about it, if you're having a balanced diet and you're just coming out of a deep cut and you're eating 2,000 calories a day, if it's a balanced diet, you're still not getting that much of any one macronutrient.
yeah.
But if it's ketogenic, you can still actually have some of these really rich foods, and your hunger is so much higher that everything just tastes really good. Like when I
Mm,
was deep into my 2020 cut, I will always remember I had just like, I don't know if it was 85/15 or 97/3, like ground beef, just that, right? Because it was just carnivore diet, that and salt. I'm not kidding. This was like a 9 out of 10 enjoyability for this meal because I was
mm.
so hungry. It's just always amazing to me anytime I bulk up or cut down how much that can change. And
Oh
then
yeah,
on the
it's
appetite, these last two diets, getting down to even, I'm probably like 12% right now, 12% body fat. And
mm,
some of that was almost unintentional. Like it was just the appetite is just not the same as it used to be. I know you and I both talked about some crazy feasts we used to have.
yeah. No, it's. I mean, I remember when I was doing my photo shoot, and so at one point, but man, I should find that video. I think you saw that when I'm like noticing that I have abs
Mhm.
without flexing them the
Yeah,
first
yeah,
time.
yeah, right.
Yeah. Actually, still I found it somewhere, so like it will be posted. So it's hilarious. But like that one, when like near the end, I did this like 13 or 1400 calories for like 3 or 4 days, but like while doing like I don't know, 15 to 20,000 steps and like 7 days a week
Wow.
in the gym, like 2 hours at a time. So like I mean, very very much underfed and like could barely sleep. And so I remember like, okay, I'm gonna do this for like 4 days or like 3 or 4 days, and then the rest of the week I'm gonna be at like 28. Whereas
Hmm.
like, that was way higher than what I've been on for like the past like I don't know 3 4 months. And then like I remember like the first day of 2800, and I just like had instead of just strawberries, I had like this mixed berry thing, and then like I remember I had that for like breakfast, and then I honestly felt like I was on some kind of a drug. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, I remember like catching up with then girlfriend, now wife, and like she like didn't recognize me. Like, why are you so cheerful? I was like, hey, yeah, like let's do this and let's do this. Like, full of energy. I mean, it's actually insane. Like,
Yeah, that happened with my
food can have that
2020
effect.
cut. It was the leanest I'd ever been, and it really was almost like it was just like a single day or two, but there was almost this, I hate to call it manic, but this weird feeling of like thinking about how I'd be adding calories and future refeeds and everything.
Mm,
And you look back and you're like, why why was I like that? But that's it's obviously just that biology kicking in.
yeah.
Cool. So let's see. This will probably be a better one for you and Jeffrey Schofield. So
Mm.
Muhammad asked, what are y'all's opinion on using gymnastic rings for bodybuilding purposes, like for
Oh.
push-ups and dips? And obviously,
Mm.
Jeff has a whole book on rings, but I think you've
Mm.
used rings, but you also use the those
Yeah,
grips
the
for pull-ups. Yeah,
angles
yeah.
90s. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that. Oh, by the way, like I remember, I think it was actually maybe under one of our Q&As, but maybe on some, maybe I was doing it one with Sotak back in the day. But like someone commented that there is another thing like Angles 90s, but that's like a bit bigger and like you can even use straps on them. Like person, or if someone else, if you know of something like that, and it's obviously like easily portable, like you can just put it in your gym bag and like easily put it on something. So person or someone else, if you know what that is, please comment because I was trying to find it everywhere and couldn't. So I mean, I think it could be a huge game changer for some people. Like it could actually revolutionize their training because certain exercises will just become like permanently joint friendlier. It depends on how sensitive your connective tissue is. Mine is pretty sensitive, I would say. Not the most injury prone guy I've ever met, but I do tend to get banged up if I use like not ideal kind of biomechanics and try to do even reasonably high volume. So, like I see people like some people do like underhand chin ups and even do it weighted and for a long time. I have no idea how they can do that. Actually, aren't you doing your heavy chin ups like overhand like this?
Historically, I always have. Yeah, I do neutral
Yeah.
sometimes though.
So like even that for me, I could not do it. So like maybe
Oh,
I
really?
can do it with body weight, but even that is kind of bugging my elbow. If I
Hmm.
did it with like when trying to hit a like some crazy PR like you do, I mean honestly that would limit my PR potential by itself because like it would hurt so badly.
Interesting.
Yeah. So and then the good thing is that like you're using these rotating implements like an angles 90 or gymnastic rings, and you don't really need to think about it because like your body is pretty smart. Like it knows how it wants to rotate, and so now it will be able to. Because I mean, I don't know if that needs to be cleared up, like why it's good if your wrist can rotate, but like, your wrist wants to rotate, but it can't because you're holding onto the bar. So the next joint would be the elbow. The elbow cannot rotate, so it just like puts a lot of torque on the elbow, and over time it kind of just messes it up. So that's why it's good. And on push-ups and things like that, it's great. It's just kind of difficult to set up in a lot of gyms. I never really bothered with it. Like there are weighted push-ups and things like that you can like do in other ways.
Yeah.
I think more conveniently, but it's great if you do it.
Do you find, because like, so I've actually never used gymnastic rings, and theoretically, I understand why it would be better that you have that free movement. For some reason, when I imagine it, I feel like I would be weaker because of the lack of stability. Like I'm thinking of like hanging rings, so it's a little bit different with what you use because they're not that long. Like you're not going to shake around so much. But I just imagine if I'm pulling up on rings, that because it almost in the same way that you're not as strong on a dumbbell bench as you would be on a barbell bench, relative to the weight.
Yeah, it's really funny. It's really funny because I thought the same exact thing. Um, so like the first time I actually used rings with any regularity was here. So in Macedonia, there is this gym that has it. So and like at the other places, it was a bit more inconvenient to do it. Like in the gym, like the pull-up bar was at the same place as the squat rack. So I just okay, I'm gonna do it on the rings. And so like as I was hanging there, I was waiting for that thing that you showed that like, oh, it's gonna be like wobbly. So I will have to like actively keep myself steady, and it just didn't happen. So I guess like the weight of your body pulling it down is just too big for that. So it's not going to be moving like this. So yeah, it's not wobbly like that at all. And like I mean, honestly, like since then I did lots of like PR attempts and whatever on like static implements, like neutral grip or on rings. And I mean, my performance is basically the same.
Hmm.
So there's just really no difference. And like there were even like longer chunks of time of doing it on a static implement and then going back to angles 90 or rings and same. And also like just one tip for people like I like the angles 90s and might even stick with it even if I had some other thing that I could use like a gymnastic ring that's easily portable because I have pretty small hands, and so it's just much easier for like I can actually like hold on to it firmly.
Yeah.
Gymnastic ring is a bit too thick, so like it's yeah, it's kind of like once not that it's like close to slipping off, but I need to exert like noticeable extra exertion that I need to have just holding onto it. So
Yeah. Interesting.
there's that.
Yeah, I'd actually like to do a little bit more of it at some point. I was thinking when I finish dieting, I might start getting into more of some of that stuff. So
Yep.
let's see. Zachary asks, how do you hit hamstring curls at home? So this will be a quick one. So I have two, actually, probably right before this is released. So this actual weekend, I think I'll be releasing my home gym tour, which is not the highest quality video I've done. It's just like a quick kind of scan through everything. So this Q&A will be probably coming out the week after. So go check out last week's video. But basically, I have two different benches that can perform leg curls. It's not ideal in terms of the strength curve, but I will say the one actually feels pretty stimulative to my hamstrings. And then I also do I kind of got this from Eric Helms. I do a single leg lying leg curl. I was doing it seated, and I just noticed some nerve pain in my back from doing that. So I don't do any sort of seated leg curls anymore. I just
Hmm.
switched. Both of them are lying now. And then obviously I can do RDLs and I can do dumbbell, barbell, or Smith machine variations. And then legs in general, I've got the Smith squat and I got a whole squat rack and the whole power rack and everything in there, so I can pretty much do everything I need to.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you have cables, then it's pretty straightforward. Otherwise, like hamstrings for home training without a proper setup like what you have, it's might be the hardest thing to train. Like for like in terms of like having a leg curl type movement, or the others obviously you can always do, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Waj asks, can you waste your newbie gains with suboptimal training, or will they just come slower and faster? Slower slash faster.
Yeah, I think that second one.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's funny because like I actually used to worry about the same thing when
same.
I thought of the many months and years that I wasted with doing really stupid stuff, and it's like, okay, so like I hope at least that I'm still a newbie and I can like grow and not like advanced and still looking like this, or I mean, or the way I did back then, but like still like it's been years at this point, and it's like so I guess like an easy way to test it is like, okay, how strong are you? So like if you don't look like you lift, so you're still waiting for the newbie gains, but you're like benching, I don't know, like 3 plates and squatting 4 plates, four plates, right? That's yeah, okay, 4 plates and deadlifting 6 plates. Then it's like, man, like I mean that maybe, but it's just not going to happen because first of all, those things tend to go kind of hand in hand,
Yep.
and like newbie gains are not a time consideration. It's stimulus and then response, or stimulus and adaptation consideration. So like newbie gains mean like you input the proper stimulus and you get a lot of adaptation. So if that just hasn't happened, then you probably still have them to make. And like you can go off of your strength. So like if you still have the strength levels of what is considered to be a newbie, then likely that you have still the same thing with your muscle mass.
Yeah, so it's funny because I actually posted a question back on T Nation when I was in high school asking about this. And so, I mean, we're talking quite a while ago now. And I said, is it possible that you're wasting gains if you're trying to gain strength while dieting? Because in my mind,
Mm,
I was like, oh, well, if you have a certain potential to gain strength, wouldn't you want to do that while bulking? And should you just try to
mm,
maintain strength? This is when I was a beginner, so I could have gained strength while dieting. And I was like, well, is that just wasting it? Because I'm clearly not going to gain muscle while dieting, and therefore I'm wasting that potential and should be. So I can certainly understand the thought process with that. I think in reality, that's just not how it works. If you were gaining a lot of strength during a dieting period, you could still be gaining lean body mass if you were a beginner. And they're just going to
yeah,
correlate. So more than likely, you'll just catch up. And the same thing would be with wasting early gains. If you're just not trained effectively, it's not like, oh, you only had 3 years from the time you touched a dumbbell to get your new gains, and if you don't get it, they're wasted. The
yeah,
only time that would like kind of apply maybe is if somebody was like, well, I just kind of did whatever for the first 15 years. I started at 20. Now I'm 35 and I've only gained like, 5, 10 pounds of muscle because I was just doing CrossFit. I don't know. I was just doing like nothing really effective. And
yeah,
then you're like, hey, now I really want to try to maximize size. I don't think that you at 45 in this example are going to be able to be as big as if you had been doing things properly from the time you were 15, right? So
yeah,
like I do think at some point you can always try, you can always gain muscle relative to your age. Not saying anybody should just discount it. I think Jay Cutler didn't even get started training seriously until he was like 20, so he certainly wasn't like an early teen. But the point being that I do think at some point you're not going to reach that full potential that if you got super early. But that's like, again, I'm
yeah.
talking if you waited until your mid 30s, not, you're 23.
Yes, and also like it's funny these concerns because like yeah, I also had that thought that this is actually also a common question. Like so I was training, or I've been training now for 5 years or something, but I spent so much of that dieting, and this was actually me pretty much, and it's like well, how could you have wasted it? Because like it clearly like you were in the gym, but were you actually like what do you have to show for? So muscle mass, no. Okay, so like if you can still gain, like if you still had the potential, or if you had the potential to be like, I don't know, 20% bigger, well, you're not 20% bigger, so that should be there. But and also strength, like, or how much stronger are you now than what you were in the beginning? Well, not by that much. Well, then I guess it's a self-solving problem. Like if you did something to mess up your training, then like that actually manifested in not getting the results. So like you should still be able to theoretically make them. So yeah, it tends to just take care of itself, luckily.
Yep. All right. I think this is pronounced Ian Raffle. What size are your arms now? Do you notice more gains from more volume or from higher intensity? I think Abel, you had some good experience
Um,
bringing your arms up, right?
yes. I was hoping that it will continue that good experience, but it kind of hit a wall after that. Just looking
Yeah.
at like, do I have a measuring tape? No, but I mean, I measured it relatively recently. It's like right around 40 still. So which is not, it's not that big. No, okay, this background blur does not help. Now I'm gonna turn it off a little bit. Uh, don't blur my background. There you go. So that's arms currently. This is 40 centimeters or so. So like maybe like 40 and a half. So
That would
that's
be
should be,
just shy of 16 inches.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah,
You
that
look
was
pretty
actually a
lean there. How much do you weigh now?
uh so I'm not actually not that lean. Like you should see my stomach. I mean, I don't have a belly, but it's
Yeah.
like honestly, I just don't look particularly lean. I'm yeah, like actually pretty even close to 90. So I
Okay.
only weigh in the gym because like our scale went bad like a year ago and just haven't
Okay.
replaced it. But yeah, I'm so fed up with these digital scales. Like honestly, I miss the
Oh,
those
really?
simpler ones. Yeah, like they were always like always had problems with them. I don't know what's happening. But what was I going to say? Yeah, like
Leanness. And...
the thing is that I think that I need to like I'm curious like if I started training legs properly again because like I've been basically like a 2 year long like skipping leg day streak at this point. So I'm curious like how much my body weight would go up if I started training legs properly again because like so at this point it's it shrank noticeably. Like, it's actually getting to the point where like it's all I feel awkward training my legs in the gym because like what are people thinking? Like, oh, little guy, like trying to bring up those chicken legs. So it's like I want to go in sweatpants, but it's too warm.
Right, right.
So
That's
yeah,
funny.
but yeah, what
Um,
about you? How big are your arms?
so I actually just weighed in this morning. I'm down to, what was I, 187.6. So I'm pretty light right now. And it's interesting how we just hold
That's
body fat so differently. I mean, obviously that's the case, but it's always the case that when you diet down and you're like, like, should I have ever been that heavy? Like, should I have been 220? And it's tough because there's such a
uh,
huge range that you can just look normal. I mentioned this on one of the more recent videos, but when I was up more recently to 210, 212, a lot of comments from patients. Wow, looks like I mean, I dress professionally at work, so this is like, button down shirt and everything. But even then, wow, you're looking a lot bigger, comments and whatnot. Now, on the other hand, like my team is telling me I've lost my butt and all of that stuff.
mhm,
So it's just how it goes,
yeah,
right? But then you see yourself and you're like, okay, I'm lean, but I'm not shredded. I'm like beach
yeah,
lean. And I'm like, man, like should I have ever been? I mean, this is the realization that
yeah,
obviously a lot of people who've been lifting for a long time come to, right? It's like, should I have actually been that heavy? And I think it just depends on what you want. Like I enjoyed being 210. I enjoyed feeling bigger and all of that. I just don't think long term it's great for me. Um, but your arms right now look leaner than mine, I think, at my current weight, and you're 10 pounds heavier than I am. But then there might be other things that obviously look leaner and whatnot. So
yeah, yeah.
waistline is
It's
down to like low 32s, abdominal skin fold. Like I just weighed in this morning. So abdominal skin fold was like 8 or 9 millimeters. So and then What else? So arm size, my right arm is bigger. So if I talk arm size, I'm always talking like right arm. So it's between
Mm,
16 and a half and 16 and three quarters. So I'm happy with that for this weight. Like for this weight, that's still about the biggest they've been, which again, obviously weight is a huge
yeah,
component because I
that's
haven't lost really any strength on my arms. But when I was 212, I mean, they were 17 and three quarters, like almost basically an inch bigger, like almost 17 and three quarters. So um, you could assume that if I've lost no strength, I've probably lost almost no muscle, and yet there's an inch off my arms, right? And then if I were to get on stage,
yeah.
like Eric Helms, I think when he's on stage, his arms are 15 and a half or something like that. Um, and I'd probably have
Mm,
to lose another 15 pounds to get on stage, and I'd probably lose another inch, right? So that obviously is a big factor.
yeah. Yeah, it's actually was thinking that like maybe like in terms of everyday aesthetics, the best thing to train would be, or an not the best, an underrated way to train would be like focusing more on the brachialis, right?
Mhm.
So because like I guess like that would be the thing that you see from the side. Because
Yeah, I
like
can't
that
say I've seen, I don't know if you've ever done any forearm specialization phases. I have. Anytime I've done them, like you maybe in terms of measurement, you get up a little bit like a quarter inch or something, but then it goes away. It could be inflammation and whatnot. So I agree with you. And obviously that does work to some degree if you look at like rock climbers and whatnot, and they have these meaty forearms a lot of the time. But um, in
yeah.
theory, I agree. Like your calves, your forearms, and your neck, that's what everybody sees.
Yeah, I'm curious how it looks like for like just people walking on the street because like now it's in the summer, like okay, if I just run across to the store, like I'm often just gonna go something like this, like whatever I was wearing at home, and I'm curious, like because like I don't think in a tank top or something, like you saw me in that video yesterday, like yeah, so like I'm sure for the average person, like that looks pretty buff, but by like you put me next to Jeffrey, I'm like probably I would dress up really quickly. Like I would not want to stand next to him. But at the same time, my standards have changed so much. Like some of these actors and whatever that I used to like idolize as a kid, like they were like seemed super jacked for me, and like now they are like, well, this kind of looks like a skinny guy. Um, so I'm curious, like, how do I look like now to someone in the grocery store across the
Yeah, yeah,
street? Like, do they think
sure.
like, whoa, like that guy's a monster?
Yeah. Yeah, I know when I was like younger, certainly teens and even 20s, that was definitely like a focus of how I appear. Now, I forget who I was just talking to about this. Maybe was it the last podcast? I don't know. It might have just been a conversation, but how that stuff's nice, but it's so much less of a focus. Like if anything, like it's funny because most people listening probably think, oh, everybody wants to get lean if they have a superficial outlook or if they care about what other people look like. And as I was just alluding
Yeah,
to, in fact, in my case, if I was just caring what other people thought about how I looked, I'd just be heavier. I would just stay at 210. The reason I feel so comfortable
yeah,
dieting down is I don't really care about that stuff anymore. But certainly
mm,
like can factor in. But to answer this guy's question, because there was that first part about the arm size, but then he
yeah,
said, more volume or higher intensities. They're not exclusive of one another, obviously. I mean, you could have if you mean intensity, you actually mean like intensiveness or difficulty. You could still be very high volume and be training very hard. Or if you mean intensity, like percentage of one rep max, you could also have high volume and higher weights slash lower reps. Obviously, in that case, if you're doing a ton of sets with low reps, you do have to be careful with elbow and wrist issues for arm movements. My personal bias has always just been pretty moderate rep ranges. I've done a number of arm specializations, not in many years, but I used to. And I do think like it would be disingenuous to say that I don't notice any correlation between more volume and results. I just don't notice a huge difference. Like I don't do 20 sets of a body part and be like, wow, like this is so clearly different than eight. But if somebody said to me, hey,
yeah,
gun to your head, your arms have to get as big as possible in the next year, yeah, I wouldn't do 6 sets per body part. I just wouldn't. Like I would just say, okay, I think maybe I'll get a little bit more if I'm doing like 12 to 15. I don't think it's gonna hurt anything. So I'd probably do a little bit more volume. It's just that most people, like most of the people I train, they might say, hey, like arms are their goal, but everything needs to come up. And it's like, okay, well, I don't want to waste 2 hours of your training week towards just arm training, even though the arm results might be a little bit better. I think generally speaking, you would want to develop everything. And so you just kind of have to ration out that volume and time across the week.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty much same experience. Like it's tough to tell, because it's the gains that you're making. I'm talking about learning from experience. So, what have I noticed in terms of correlation with results and then volume? With clients, actually, it's often like tuning it back that produces better results. But I don't think that is just tuning it back or dialing the volume back that is producing the good results. It's a combination of things. It's tracking more meticulously, being deliberate about the progression, having a strategy for when the progression doesn't happen, like lining up are you cutting or bulking, and then lining that up with how much you're doing. So all of that in tandem is what is producing a result, if hopefully it does. As for myself, like it's a lot tougher because first of all, I tried a lot of different things, and secondly, it's like the gains that you're making, you're only going to make them once. So if you accomplish something today and that worked better or worse than last time, well, certainly if it worked worse, you cannot conclude much from that, because like it should work worse because you're more advanced. If at least what you did in the past was working. So like if you made gains in the past, then the gains today should come harder. So like that is already making it tough to really conclude from experience. But yeah, like I would say that there were definitely times when my volume for my arms was just too low. So it's even if it's just purely correlation, because I was sticking with low volumes for the arms for so long, and like it basically like on the dot at the same size it stayed. And I could already tell exactly what size is going to be when I'm going up like 5 kilos or 10 kilos, and then what size is going to go back to. So,
Right, right.
and then that went up like around like 2 centimeters. So like, like 0.8 inches or something like that, when I consistently trained it with higher volume. So volume does have an effect, of course.
And that's now maintained that size,
Yeah, yeah. And
and volume is back
yeah,
down.
volume is back down, not quite as low as what it was before, but so like it's I stayed at around like the 12-ish on average range for both triceps and biceps each, for like a good year.
Hmm.
Like that's when I first hit like that 40-ish mark. And before that, I mean, I was down at like 3 to 6.
Right, right.
So yeah, and now I'm more like maybe like 6 to 8, so something like that, just to be sure.
Yep, yep, cool. All right, guys. So that is part one of the Q&A on my channel here, and obviously Brains and Gains podcast. So we're going to go over to Abel's channel for part two. We'll have a link below for that, so check that out.